Hi, I'm Hamza Hassan, and in this demo I'll be showing my working prototype for the project comparing regional AWS Lambda and Lambda Edge. So importantly, this demo isn't about raw performance claims yet, it's about showing that the architecture is actually deployed correctly and also the routing logic behaves consistently, and also now that the testing setup is capable of producing repeatable performance measurements. So essentially all measurements also are focused on client perceived behavior, which is the correct perspective for latency sensitive systems. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the S3 bucket that was made. As you can see here, the S3 bucket holds the static HTML variants. So we have au.html, which is Australia, index.html, which is the default page, sg.html, which is Singapore, and uk.html, which is UK, and us.html, which is for the US. So from a testing perspective, this matters because the payload size is controlled and also the complexity of the content itself is identical across all regions. And any latency differences observed later are more architectural, not content driven. Also, if we can see in permissions, the bucket itself is also private, so it's only accessed, as I've set in the bucket policy, it's only accessed through the CloudFront using origin access control, ensuring that the edge architecture is evaluated more realistically. Now, if I can show you the CloudWatch distribution, this is the CloudWatch distribution that was made. If I show you the behaviors, as you can see in the viewer request and also the viewer response, I've attached the Lambda function, which is also version 29, to the viewer request and viewer response. So at this stage, the function executes before the cache decision, rewrites the URI based on the country, and also indirectly controls cache keys. For testing clarity, the caching is currently disabled, which isolates any execution or routing overhead and any network behavior, any sort of client-side latency. However, later I would enable it to actually compare cache miss against cache hit, which lets me measure how caching shifts away from the origin or from the function itself. Now moving on to the functions itself. Now we're in the EU West 2 London region, so this is where the regional Lambda function is hosted. The regional Lambda, which is behind the Lambda, behind the API gateway. So the routing logic between both functions, also in US East 1, the routing logic are similar in both cases, which is critical because it ensures any differences in latency or stability comes from where and also how it's actually executed. So not many differences in application logic. So both are hosted in two different regions. These are the two. Now let's check also the CloudWatch logs. Let's change the region. So also, as discussed, observability, it's more easier to observe the regional Lambda over the Lambda Edge. So let me just show you the regional Lambda, which is hosted in EUS2. Let me go on to the log group. These are the long streams. Let's go on the most recent one. These are the most recent logs, and later on we will also trigger the Lambda regional Lambda through curl and also browser just to show you it updates. So as you can see, this is the internal metrics where it's logging the regional Lambda. It can show us, it can show us the build duration, the memory size, the init duration, the max memory used, the duration itself. So there's a lot of metrics that it can show. So these logs allow correlation between the internal execution time and also the client side latency, which can be observed. I'll show you later in Postman. For Lambda Edge, this, just to repeat again, this level of per request observability isn't really available which becomes an explicit architectural trade-off, which can be explored in the analysis, and I'll try to cover that up during analysis. So let's go to Postman. Okay, so in Postman, I've set two collections. I've set FYP Lambda Edge tests and then regional tests, just so that they're more clear. So I'll now demonstrate using Postman. So I'll do a single request to, let's do the regional Lambda first. I'll do a single request first to, I've already tested this one. Let's do a single request to GB. So as you can see, the countries, the key is country, the value's GB, though the response is going to confirm. As you can see, it confirms functional correctiveness by returning the detected country, also the variant, the selected variant, and more importantly for testing, Postman can expose things like time to first byte, SSL handshake, TCP handshake, DNS lookup, and also just the total response time itself. So these metrics help distinguish network overhead, connection setup costs, etc. So this is how it's processed. Now also, I could also do individually. However, there's a quicker way that I would try to do as testing. I would do runner, where for example, I would iterate this specific request. Maybe let's try 5 times. Just drag that into there. Iterate 5 times, select from computer. Let's do use locally. Okay, let's try the different select from computer. Use locally. Let's do iterations of 5. So these are 5 iterations that happened. And also let's test out, let me show you that. Actually, we'll show more testing later on. But just to move beyond simple samples, I can use just Postman runner. Here I can just repeat requests in more of a controlled iteration. And later I could export and look at more of the compute statistics like P50, P95, P99, etc., standard deviation. So this is critical for also answering questions about latency, predicting the latency, stability under repetition, etc. So now let's test the Lambda Edge setup. So I've already got it saved here, Lambda Edge. Let's test this setup here. GB, same instance. There, it works. See, again, it shows the response time. It can show the DNS lookup, the TCP handshake, time to first byte, etc. So here, instead of just JSON meta, the client also receives the actual HTML, as you can see here, the actual HTML object. So the detected country, the rewritten URI, and later cache behavior via head is like X cache. Because Lambda observability is limited, Postman timing and also headers become the primary measurement tool for the Lambda Edge setup. So now let's test the curls. Now, let's test curls and then I'll show you the CloudWatch logs. Let's test curling. Let's curl. Let's try out the regional Lambda first. So if we curl it, as you can see here, it produces the country, GB, the variant, the source, the request ID, and the timestamp. So let's try the other. Let's try the other countries. Let's do AU. AU would show the same. It will show the different variant as well. Let's do SG. SG shows the same. UK. And lastly, let's do index. Index shows the index.html file. However, as you saw earlier, that the latest metrics were from yesterday. So we're going to see now that it's the 3rd. Let's go back into the CloudWatch metrics. As you can see now, this is the last metrics that were made from the Postman, and then continued from, as you can see, it's 140. Let's go on here. Let's go to 139 was the last request. As you can see, here's the duration, memory size, max used. So it shows that it shows the streams, the CloudWatch streams, from every time the Lambda regional Lambda is actually invoked. Now let's do the invocations for let's do for CloudWatch metrics. Sorry, let's do it for now the Lambda Edge setup through CloudFront. As you can see here, we've curled it for the GB. It shows that it's a miss. That's already we know, because we've disabled CloudFront caches at the moment. It shows the UK.html file. It shows a 200 OK, and also the time, the date, the last time it was modified. And also you can see that the server, it comes from S3. So let's test out also. Let's test out AU now, the next region. Shows the same thing, just different HTML. And then also it's again miss from CloudFront. Now let's do SG for Singapore. SG, miss from CloudFront. Now let's do US. US.html, debug countries US, and miss from CloudFront. And then lastly index, which is the default page. Countries default, index.html, miss from CloudFront. So essentially the curl actually allows me to confirm the headers independently, verify any routing behavior, and also validate the time to first byte and the total time outside of GUI tool. So it allows cross-validation of measurements. Now also let's test them out through the browser itself. So let's test out first the Lambda Edge setup. Let's still, even though caching is disabled, I'm going to still do it through just an incognito site, just so that this is a fresh request. Let's test out. Let's test out through a browser. As you can see, sorry, let's test out again. But let's put the dev tools on. As you can see, we've tested out the Lambda Edge setup through CloudFront, through a browser, for Great Britain, the UK version. As you can see, it also shows us extra information here. For example, the debug countries GB, the miss from CloudFront, so it's missed from the cache, and also the UK.html. Now let's test AU, which is the Australia region. So AU version, this content served to the users located in Australia. Let's check this. It also shows the same. And then let's check SG. Same thing. The content served for the users located in Singapore. Shows the same metrics. Miss from CloudFront. The debug country is SG Singapore, and then SG.html. So these are query strings. These are the query strings that I'm going to be using. So SG, let's do US. Same thing. Shows miss from CloudFront, US, us.html. And then let's do lastly index, the index file. Or let's do, this would be the index file, the default page. So this shows default index.html. So this is just to show that just to verify another way that the results in the browsers actually show the correct region specific page and it's served, and also the routing decision are visible to end users. So the system behaves as expected from a user's perspective. So the pages are initially simple at this stage. As you can see, it's just very simple HTML, but visual differentiation can be enhanced. So I'm looking to enhance it later on using CSS to make the pages more personal, so have more personalization, more explicit for each region. Maybe involve flags or involve specific native colors, etc. So what this demo shows, so I've showed you both architectures are deployed correctly. The routing logic behaves consistently, and also the testing framework can measure latency, variability, and also the cache behavior as well, and observability differences between regional Lambda and also Lambda Edge. So the next step is to the full scale benchmarking and also statistical analysis and comparison of later on when I doing cache enabled against cache disabled behavior for the final submission.